I am so excited, Buttercups. We are going to be talking about another square in our beloved Savannah, Georgia. And this is a square that I have personally experienced spooky stuff. And I am just so excited to talk about it today. So, today we are talking about Calhoun Square. Woohoo, let's go! Calhoun Square is very unique in that it retains all of its original buildings. It is one of the final three squares to be created in 1851, and it is situated along Abercorn Street, which you'll soon realize is of great importance. You'll understand. It was named after a somewhat controversial man named John C. Calhoun. He was dubbed the Great Orator of the South. He was a South Carolina statesman who served as vice president for both John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. In 1957, a Senate committee selected him as one of the five greatest United States senators in history. But that doesn't mean he didn't have his controversial things. One of his controversial things was being pro-slavery. I am not here to discuss that, so that this is just history, guys, I promise. In 2015, there was a church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, and this encouraged a movement to remove monuments dedicated to pro-slavery and Confederate figures. This year, the monument to Calhoun in Charleston was vandalized. And Yale had an issue as well trying to rename Calhoun College. And here's the thing. I do get it. And it is controversial. This Savannah Square's namesake just really adds to this ominous history, though. I promise. Um, Unfortunately, upon their deaths, slaves were often brought to these unhallowed grounds and disposed of without coffins, inhumanely discarded like yesterday's garbage. It's been estimated that around 1,000 slaves, quote unquote, rest beneath this square. And we have to question if they will ever truly be at peace. And I don't know if changing the name of this square will be the thing that changes it, or just giving them their due time, if that makes sense. Like sitting there and talking about it and just trying to understand. And to my ghostly friends, you will understand when I say sitting there trying to just trying to reach them, you know. Now, there are historical things, the historical sites of Calhoun Square are generally not positive what is said about it, but there are a couple of things around there. In 1865, the Massey School first opened its doors, and it was the first public school in the city of Savannah. It was designed by architect John Morris and named for Peter Massey, who bequeathed the $5,000 necessary to build the school, quote, for the education of the poor children of Savannah, end quote. So Peter Massey basically said, here's $5,000, John, build this. We need to educate the poor, which I think is great. It closed in 1974, but the following year it did begin operating as a museum and resource center known as the Massey Heritage Center. Educational, so it shifted from educational in terms of like schooling to being a museum, but lessons are still taught there. You'll step into a 19th century classroom when you enter and gain an appreciation for early childhood education. And you get to learn about Savannah's history from the European settlements to the lives of the Creek and Yamacraw people. We talked about that last time too, who lived in the area long before the Europeans. The center also exhibits collections of period clothing, photographs, as well as state and local history and information on historic urban planning and preservation. So that's kind of cool. I might have to go there one day. Another one there is the Wesley Monumental United Methodist Church. This is Savannah's first Methodist church, and it was established in 1807. It was dedicated to Charles and John Wesley. John founded the Methodist denomination, and his brother wrote the words to countless Christian hymns, including well-known "Hark, the Herald Angels Sing." Wesley Chapel closed its doors in 1862 due to the success of a nearby Trinity Church, but was resurrected in April of 1868. In 1874, plans were put into motion for the creation of a new building for the church on Calhoun Square. The plans for the new Wesley Monumental United Methodist Church were designed by architects Dixon and Carson. The ground was broke in 1875, but it was quite the undertaking. Contributing factors to the church's slow development were financial woes and the yellow fever epidemic. It took 15 years before the new church finally reached completion, y'all. Which, given the time frame, that makes a lot of sense. It would, if anybody has ever visited Calhoun Square, you would really understand that this history does have a lot of ominous, but it makes sense. It's very ominous, but it makes sense to the happenings, if you will, of the square. There have been many deaths at the Calhoun Square, and one of the more infamous ones is going to be the death of the son of a federal judge, and this man was no good. This son was Wesley S.B. And the official story, the cover up reported in the newspapers in particular, was that he fell to his death from a tall porch of the Epsy family home. This was at the corner of Abercorn and East Wayne. But legend doesn't quite agree with the official quote-unquote story. According to rumors around town, his father, Carl, the judge, was associated with bootleggers. And this was during the time of Prohibition. So we all know what that means. And apparently, Carl, the father, was known for his violently bad temper. He reportedly ruled his home with an iron fist and was rumored to even have committed murder in the past. I mean, does this surprise any single one of us? But because he was a mighty feared judge, he was never charged or even investigated. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Now, in no other surprise, we see that Wesley was the opposite of his father. And I say no surprise because when you have I don't even want to say parental figure, but in this case it was, who is one way and you see what it does, you can either go that same route or you can do the complete opposite. This son, Wesley, was the opposite. He was a deacon at the Wesley Monumental United Methodist Church, which he was named after. He became quite close with a girl who attended the church, and they eventually began to date. The problem stemmed with the fact that the girl was already spoken for. In a twist of fate, the girl was the girlfriend of one of the bootleggers tied to the judge. Dun dun dun. This is where the judge is begging his son to stop seeing the girl, as the bootlegger was even worse than the father, the judge himself. But Wesley, being just in love with this girl, refused. He stood up to his father for the first time, and it was all due to love. One horrific morning, though, they found Wesley hanging from the porch of his family home, his testicles cut off and tucked into his top lapel pocket. Retaliation by said bootlegger. Now, unfortunately, love does that, and you have to imagine that this man was so much in love that he would go against someone even worse than his dad. But this poor girl, even if she didn't want to be with the bootlegger, she would have so much fear instilled in her, I have to imagine, to know that the man that was in love with her would be found hanging with his testicles cut off and tucked into his top lapel pocket. Yes, I repeated that because, ooh. It is said that in the early morning hours, his ghost has been known to appear on the porch, arriving home late from a night out with his beloved. I wouldn't mind being on that or near that porch just to talk to him, just to see what he would have to say. If I had such time, though. If anybody else does it, hey, let me know. I wouldn't mind hearing about it. And unfortunately, that is the sad, sad tale of Wesley Epsey and his beloved. 432 Abercorn Street. This is such a spooky house, and I love it. I love it. So there's lots of endless rumors, and this draws people from around the country. And the fact is that there's really good reason for it. It is a private residence, so I recommend you do not just go and snoop around without talking to the people there first and getting, the appropriate approvals. But that being said, this house began its life in 1868 when it was being built on, you heard, it was coming. It was being built on a slave burial site. Now, we all know better that you should never build on top of burial ground. Not because of just poor taste, but you are now putting your house in a cursed area. But being in Savannah, this was going to be an unavoidable situation because of the amount of, burials. Whether it be enslaved African Americans, Native Americans, it didn't matter. Some are going to say that Savannah is cursed, it's haunted, and the fact is that could be true and it could not be true. The history is there. We have a history, and that's just facts. Now, it has gone through some things and outbreaks of yellow fever, chlor. That's another one. And a lot of people have departed, perished, if you will. And people think it's at the hands of a curse. But this specific house, getting back on track, 432 Abercorn Street, is a little bit more of a hotbed for supernatural activity. So just saying that the area around it, Calhoun Square, is considered to be ground zero for Savannah's curse. And the square surrounding it has been a witness of murder, suicides, disappearance, etc. So you can see where I'm going with this. This house was beginning to be built in 1868. And in 1869 it was finished. Benjamin Wilson was a veteran of the Civil War, and he had an ambition to climb the Savannah social ladder. He and his family moved into this house. The home he had built was considered to be one of the most expensive houses in all Savannah. It was valued at $20,000 at that time. And at this point, I do believe that I'm going to throw in what $20,000 today would be. Um, but before I finish with this, whole 432 Abercrombie section. Shortly after the family moved in, his wife died. And she was a victim of the yellow fever. This put Mr. Wilson into deep depression, but he did try his best to pull himself together. He was the only parent for his kids. But it was believed that he was not the warmest of individuals. He was hardened by war and loss. So while he did do his best, he wasn't exactly, hey, Dad, can you help me? He was strict and overbearing, and here's where things become hazy because there's no exact evidence to pinpoint what really happened. So there are rumors surrounding this house, and especially considering the whole thing of his, how he is. So one story is that he was upset when he saw that his daughter was next door at the Massey school with the poor. Now you remind ourselves that he did want to be climb that social ladder, so I can understand in his mind why he would be upset at his daughter playing with the poor, the orphans, and the black children. But I'm not saying it was right. I said I could understand it in his mindset, just to be clear. Um he didn't believe it was proper for a girl of her status to associate with a lower class, and that's just how they thought. She continued to disobey her father because she didn't have the same beliefs. And so he resorted to a torturous punishment where he tied his daughter to a chair, placed in front of the window that overlooked the square, and made her watch as the children played. He he left her there, they say, for a few days, which is all the worst that he could do when you consider the high temperatures that Savannah has. His daughter couldn't withstand the abuse and perished. Now they're saying that this place is haunted by the ghost of his daughter and the guilt of his monstrous acts. But I'm sure that's probably why they say, left this earth of his own volition. Now, you can see why that would make for a good story, especially back in those days. But there's no evidence. There's nothing to prove that that happened. There are facts that Mr. Wilson did not pass away until 1896 in Colorado. He did have two daughters, but neither one of them died in the house. And the older daughter lived to be over 80 years old, and his youngest married into another affluent Savannah family. So, unfortunately, even though the first tale could be, well, very interesting, it's not facts. There's nothing to support it. The second most common fictionalized tale about this house is that in the late 50s and early 60s, kind of depending on, kind, you know, the occupants of the home are a young married couple with two young daughters. It was the holiday season, and the family had invited longtime friends from Florida along with their children to spend, some valuable quality time at their spacious home, right? Well, the adults went out nightly on this visit, enjoying the many attractions Savannah had, and they left the four children behind, unsupervised. One evening out, the adults arrived home to find a bloody crime scene. Three of the children had been brutally killed, their bodies laid head to feet, made to shape like a triangle. The three girls had been sliced open with their organs harvested. The missing child was later found hiding in one of the bedrooms upstairs, in shock, curled in a ball like a little mouse. There were no clues, no suspects, and the murders went unsolved. Some guides will add that the fourth girl returned to Savannah years later as an adult and bought this home, on 432 Abercorn Street. Now, unfortunately, that's a titillating the tale too, right? But it's easy to see how a rumor can become pretty much good as gold. And at this point, there's no evidence. Yes, this could be a great novel, but unfortunately, there is nothing to confirm. That is one, those are several tales. Now, crazily enough, we don't know. The other rumors, the most common story just might be the most absurd. All. A student at the Savannah College of Art and Design found himself staying at the Abercorn house. When one night he disappeared, never to be seen again. Some think he was transported to another dimension by the will of demons. And truthfully, you can throw that right in the same area as Mr. Wilson and his family and the triple murders. Unfortunately, none of that can be said to be true because there's absolutely nothing to prove any of it. Nothing. And the fact is that when it was built on top of a forgotten graveyard, which is why there's probably so much going on. And there are lots of odd things. So we've talked about the history of Calhoun Square, Benjamin Wilson and his family drama, the judge, and 432 Abercorn Street. Well, now I'm super, super, super excited to tell you about my personal experience at Calhoun Square and 432 Abercorn Street. All right. So, years ago, my family went to Savannah. And when I tell you guys that I felt like I was home when we arrived, it was an unexplainable, just whoosh of feelings. I was like, okay. We ended up staying at this awesome hotel, and we just had a really good time. Well, in the process of going on the ghost tour, we ended up in Calhoun Square. And so when I tell you I have a rather large family, and so we were all scattered, but I was sitting on a normal bench with my aunt, and she has approved that I could tell this story. I need you to imagine a 6 foot blonde, like lion mane blonde Amazon woman. Okay, she trained. She was a horse trainer. Could have gone to the Olympics. I mean, she can handle a 12 to 1500 horse with no problem. So I mean, she badass, guys. But anyway, she's sitting next to me, and there's a respectful, say, I don't know, 6 inches between us, and we're just chilling. And my hands are to the front of me, her hands are to the front of her. This is important, I swear. So we're in the middle of him talking, and the guide says something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, they'll mess with your hair, they'll play with your hair and touch your shoulder and all that." Well, I get a look. She turns to look at me and she says, "Are you just touching my hair?" Like, and I was like, "No," like, showed her my hands were still where they were. So she scooted about an inch or two closer. He keeps talking and they keep doing it. So I giggled because, she was about an inch or two away from me after he got done with everything because they had kept kind of, whoever it was, touching her hair and touching her shoulder. And she was like, "What?" So, anyways, we're sitting there and he's telling us about 432 Abercorn Street and how even the homeowners don't stay in the main house. They stay in the carriage house when they do visit. And so we ended up over there. And anyways, This we were doing a recording, and we had taken one from in the middle of Calhoun Square, and we did hear something, and it was true to form. We couldn't have faked it. Our host could not have faked it, guys. I swear, we were all right there. Well, we go over there, and I'm not a scaredy cat in a lot of ways, but in some ways I am. This intrigues me, so I think it's less scary. Well, I walked over and I heard almost a whirring sound from the second window furthest away from us. And so I kind of listened. I didn't touch the window. I wasn't brave enough to do that, I swear. That being said, I suggested, can we do a reading here? Because I hear noise and somebody else heard it too. And they actually touched the window, like, to whoever that guy was, go on with your best self. Well, my aunt, she was so funny. She's kind of hunched over, and we're doing a reading, and she's hunched over trying to listen, and there's a complete strange couple, and she didn't mean anything. It was funny because she was just like hunching over, like, what's this? And so we did it, and there was a very, very unhappy voice basically saying, get away from my house, get out, leave my house alone. And it sounded male. So that being said, um, we left. But it was really, really cool because, I mean, no one really had, that hadn't been a thing. And so we kind of just went on our merry way, finished the tour, and it was a great tour, which I'm going to do it again. That being said, my cousin and I, which is the daughter of my boss, which Amazon woman aunt, also 6 foot now, just so you guys are aware, with lion mane's hair. She could just take. They're both badass, but I digress. We decided to do a reading on our own. So we go, we're standing kind of where we were before, and we're doing a reading. And I think she half expected it not to do anything. But we heard something back. We heard something. I swear to all of you, she ran to the car. Okay, I power walked because I'm not getting left behind, in a weird city by myself. Not because so much the ghost, if I'm being honest, but she did. And when I tell you, I felt the spooky vibes, like at the hotel and stuff. But the how do you put it? The spookiness was just, I loved it. But it really does happen. It didn't, like, they didn't touch me, they touched her. But I surely heard all the voices that were on that EVP reading. I swear to you guys. And I would say to any people out there who are equally intrigued, like I am, I would say the square would be a really good place to go. I would not recommend invading the privacy of the homeowner, but if you do make friends or they are okay with it, you can see there's certain spots that are a little more eerie than the others. But for me, it was just, whew, I loved it. Thank you so much, Buttercups, for joining me today as we talk about Calhoun Square in the beloved Savannah, Georgia. And some of the just few things that happened there. I appreciate you, and I hope that you all have had good weeks. I'm so sorry that I haven't been able to post as regularly as I was hoping to do. Unfortunately, life can get hectic, Wi-Fi can be spotty, and anxiety can cause delays you were hoping wouldn't be there. But all that being said, I hope you guys have a fantastically spooky week. Thank you.